Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing quite like the smell of quantum dot OLED monitor to wake you up on a Tuesday morning when you've just come back from holiday. And I am so excited about this one actually, because this is from Alienware, and this is a very upmarket premium monitor. It is 4K 240Hz when it comes to refresh rate, quantum dot OLED, so obviously going to be fantastic for image quality, HDR, smoothness, all of that good stuff. But fundamentally, versus both the Asus and the LG that we've already tested, this one is a fair bit cheaper, especially in the UK. This comes in at around about £920, $1,200, so it is still very expensive. The main difference with this is essentially that it basically has the same panel, but now it is curved. So is this going to be a hindrance, or is this actually going to be an advantage? Let's find out by taking it out of the box, having a look at it, and then actually doing a comparison with the other displays to see exactly how it performs. So stay tuned for some really exciting stuff right after a short word from this video's sponsor. Lenovo's Legion range of gaming monitors have arrived, and they offer something for everyone. Regardless of whether you're looking on a budget or after high-end, Lenovo brings cool and classy design with high-end features and performance. This Legion R27Q model packs 1440p QHD resolution, is IPS, and even overclocks to a mighty 180Hz, all for a crazily affordable price. Learn more today with the link down below. So then everybody, let's get this party started, shall we, with a quick unboxing and a breakdown of essentially what you need to know. And actually the main feature really that obviously we discussed in one of our previous videos was a comparison between WOLED and QD OLED. I'd essentially say the cheats way in a nutshell is that QD OLED tends to look a little bit more saturated, which I think is more pleasing, but then if you're not going to buy like a calibration tool, then the LG display probably looks a bit more accurate out of the box. But if you're going to obviously do like photo editing or video grading, anything like that, you should be buying like a calibration tool because it will get it one-to-one or as close as possible. But I would actually argue that the biggest, or at least the most noticeable difference for most people between the LG and the Asus was purely the fact that you had a glossy panel on the Asus ROG, whereas you had a matte finish to the LG. And that essentially made the LG better for like brightly lit rooms or where you've got a lot of light sources, whereas I think the better overall image was actually the glossy panel that was found on the Asus. And I'm assuming that because this is QD OLED, it's going to be glossy pretty much across the whole range. That might not be the case forever, but we're certainly going to find out with this Alienware. So inside the box you get like a little like shield thing if you want to cover it up at the back, and a load of people always ask, and yes, you do get all of the cables that you need inside the box, which is nice. Let's see exactly how easy this thing is to assemble, shall we? I mean, to be fair, most monitors are very straightforward these days, so I wouldn't worry about it. Oh, here it is. Does seem quite big, 32-inch. Get our stand, that is surprisingly heavy. That just plops into position, and then this back piece should go on like this. Thumb screws into position, and then we should be ready to reveal the display. Ta-da! And I must say, Simon from PC Centric, who has actually loaned me this display, has done a very good job of repackaging this. If it was me, this would have been in the bin immediately. Are you ready for the grand reveal? I mean, that wasn't actually that grand, was it? Yes, here it is, the monitor in all of its glory. And to be fair, before you turn it on, it does just look like a monitor. But what I will say, and I think the most important thing really for you to sort of gather from this video, is that while it is curved, it is not overly aggressive, right? I mean, I've seen quite a few monitors in my time, and Samsung ones in particular, they can have a really heavy, aggressive curve that I'm not a fan of at all. Whereas this is actually a fair bit more subtle. This is kind of like reminiscent of more of an ultra-wide display, really. I mean, don't forget that obviously 32-inch is a big display, so it is going to wrap around your vision slightly, but it's also not big enough that you're going to want it to be such an extreme curve that it means that if you do any sort of work on your PC at all, then everything gets a bit distorted and it can make you a little bit motion sick. So yes, this is more of a subtle curve. So if you're not that fussed either way, I don't think it's going to bother you. But yes, if you don't like curved displays, it's curved. So obviously it's probably not going to be the one for you. But looking at the back of it, I think it's a really nice, clean, modern design. I have heard there is potentially a little bit of a bug. I'm not sure if this was on one particular unit someone had, or maybe it's like a firmware thing that needs to be fixed. But apparently the RGB lighting can get stuck on even if you turn it off. But it's not going to be the most crazy thing out there in the world. So I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker, so to speak. But let's take a look at the port selection, shall we? And rather unusually, we actually have USB Type-C on the underside, which is pretty cool. cool. I imagine you can use that for like charging a phone or something. And it's obviously quite easy to reach and plug in because it's on the bottom. You've also got a USB Type A, then a 4-way selector for the menu system. And then on the back, we have our standard kettle lid power cord, which I actually quite like. And then on the other side, you have 2 more USB-As, obviously your USB upstream. And then you've got 2 HDMIs. These are both HDMI 2.1. One actually comes with ARC and eARC, which is awesome, because if you want to use this with something like a Sonos soundbar, then you have an all-in-one solution that can do that, which is awesome. And not that many monitors actually have eARC, despite the fact that most TVs are, which is something that has always annoyed me. And then you do also have DisplayPort, and this is important because this is DisplayPort 1.4. This is not 2.1 like you find on the Gigabyte Aorus monitor, like the top-end one. But from what I've seen, I don't think it makes a drastic difference. But obviously it does mean you're going to have to use display stream compression, which does add like a tiny bit of latency. The image quality isn't going to be like 100% if it was uncompressed, but for all, I don't know, for all intents and purposes really, it's not really going to make a drastic difference. And this is going to be the thing, right? If you can buy this for £900, let's say, and the monitor that has DisplayPort 2.1 is like 1100 or 1200, is it really worth paying all of that extra money for something that is probably going to come down to placebo? Maybe it's something we'll have to test at a later date. Let's get this thing plugged in though, shall we? And I will also say that I do quite like the cable management on this, because you feed it through at the back and then it appears in the middle and obviously routes around where you need it. Let's grab ourselves a keyboard and mouse with, of course, the PC Centric mouse mat available at pccentric.store. And then let's actually get this connected and see what it looks like, shall we? Here we are, and yes, I mean, this is a very, very good looking panel. And the thing I will say is that to my eyes, it looks very, very similar to the one that I've been using on my desk, which is no surprise because obviously that is the ROG version of this monitor. I mean, there are going to be some more subtle changes as well. This one actually does have a fan baked inside of it, whereas the Asus one does not. That one has a special custom heatsink, but that one is also a lot more expensive. But I believe, could be wrong, but I believe this has one fan inside it, whereas the original QD OLED G-Sync Ultimate Ultrawide had 2, and that's the one I've been using downstairs. And that one, I don't want to say it gets loud, but it's more than audible, right? As soon as you've got gaming and stuff going on, you don't notice it. Your PC makes a lot more noise. But I would like to hope, at least, that this one does make less noise than that, because that was definitely a con. But because this is glossy and curved, I think in terms of reflectivity, it is definitely going to be a bit more of a sensitive soul, shall we say. I think it will vary quite a lot. You might be surprised, because if you've already got a glossy monitor on your desk and it picks up reflections, this is going to be very different, because obviously it's going to hit different reflections in the room and display them differently. So I would say, if you've got like a flexible desk and bits and lights and things you can move around, you'll probably be a lot more happy with this than if you've just got one fixed spot and maybe it's next to a window. That's when it's potentially going to be a little bit more risky. It doesn't really seem to be picking up too many reflections to me anyway. I mean, let's get this on the camera, look, and actually see what we can do. It's very very bright at the moment. Oh, it must be in HDR mode. That would probably explain it. And also, why does it do that? It defaults to 60 Hertz.
Madness.
It says that the peak brightness is 426, which obviously isn't true. But then interestingly, something else that you'll clearly see here, or maybe not because the screen is too bright, is that it says it's actually certified for Dolby Vision, which is also a bit of a rarity in the PC monitor world. Again, you're getting it on TVs, but not so much on PC monitors, which is odd when you get such high-end ones like this, but I guess that's why you want to integrate it. I imagine that will probably make the monitor a little bit more expensive due to licensing, but then this is the cheapest one of the lot, which also is a little bit strange. But essentially, Dolby Vision support in supported games and supported films and content and stuff is going to give you better dynamic metadata. So essentially, in theory, you could get better color, or you could get like lower lows and brighter brights, because it's done on a scene-by-scene basis rather than having to sort of master for like the whole film in one go. I think it's going to be slightly different with like PC games though, because you can change it like on a scene-by-scene basis yourself anyway. But yes, we'd rather have Dolby Vision support than not. So this is definitely a good thing. I mean, I've just turned off HDR, but it is still really, really bright, isn't it? That is a very, very punchy display. There's no doubt about that. Loads of saturation to the colors as well. But something else that I do want to quickly test is to see how drastically the image changes in terms of brightness and maybe flickeringness when you open like a bright white window. Because what often happens on OLEDs is you get some automatic brightness adjustment. That means that the larger the window size, the dimmer it has to be. So what we can do to test this is essentially just pop open an Explorer window like that. I mean, honestly, that is actually pretty impressive. I mean, on the older generation of OLED monitors, you'll definitely see some like auto brightness leveling. But if it is happening, which I'm sure it is, it's a lot more subtle this time around. It's mainly going to be in scenes like this where you've got like a dark background and a light thing like that gets bigger and smaller, like a white box essentially. But we can do a little test on the desktop as well, but it doesn't seem to be drastic there either. So it's going to be worse in HDR when those brights are pushed even further. But yes, honestly, I'm actually very impressed with that. The Asus actually had its own setting to control this, but to my eyes, initially, we'll test it properly in the review, not seeing anything particularly negative or noticeable at this stage. But let's get a move on, shall we, and actually start testing this with some games. But the first thing that I would recommend that anyone that has an HDR monitor does before proceeding is to actually open this HDR Calibration tool app. And it's on the Windows Store, it's completely free, and essentially it's gonna, well, calibrate the HDR to your monitor's specifications. So we hit Get Started, and then you get all of these boxes that will be displayed on screen. And essentially this box is your minimum brightness. So on OLED, this should be completely 0. Then we move to our next one. This is going to be our peak brights. And you'll probably notice that the boxes go completely white at quite a low level if you've had like a mini LED monitor or something before that does 2000 nits. That's going to be all the way over here. Whereas a monitor like this that's OLED is going to be a fair bit lower. But I mean, I would like that to be slightly higher. I said earlier, surely that peak brightness isn't right, but at the moment, 500 nits seems to be the cutoff point. Maybe this is just a setting within the monitor itself. Whoa, actually, future markers here. I think this was potentially just a bug where Windows Desktop is actually Dolby Vision and we've turned it off and maybe had to reopen the app or something. Because I've now put this in HDR 1000 and the app is then displaying as I would expect again. So if we go back to our maximum luminance, if we set this to 1000, that's when the whole box goes white. So essentially what you're doing is saying any signal up to 1000 nits is displayed in like various different brightness amounts, whereas anything that's 1000 nits or higher is essentially send the maximum signal to the monitor, and this essentially stops you sometimes getting brights that aren't as bright as they should be. At least that's the theory. But this does seem to work properly now, so that's 1000 nits in both the smaller and then the larger window tests, which is cool. But let's take this opportunity now to actually start gaming. And obviously the first thing we've got here is some Cyberpunk 2077. This is a title I've played quite a lot, and it's very, very good for HDR, as we have quite a lot of, well, I was going to say sunspots, that's a light. A lot of lighting hotspots anyway, that's really good for HDR, because obviously it's all about the difference already between the extreme brights and then like the low, more shadowy areas of your screen on screen at the same time. And because it's OLED, you're going to get that true perfect contrast really that you can only get with a display that can properly display blacks. But because this is not massively bright at the moment, I would say this looks absolutely fantastic, but it's not the best that I've seen because all of the real light hotspots, I suppose, are not sort of, I don't want to say blinding me because that sounds bad. I mean, good HDR shouldn't be all about just having like maximum brightness all the time. It should just have those peak areas of luminance that really do make the image pop and look a lot more lifelike. So this is definitely very, very good. I would also say actually the thing that I've noticed is that if anything, I quite like the curve on this, which was a bit unexpected because I would have guessed that I would have not liked the curve, but it kind of is a little bit more immersive because the four corners of the screen are a little bit nearer to you and they don't, well, feel as far away. Again, if you are going to be using this for a lot of work, especially anything where you need straight lines, I would not advise going for a curved display pretty much ever, but I do want to see if there are some other settings in the menu to try and get this a little bit brighter. So, okay, this is now in display HDR True Black, and obviously we would have to do a recalibration, which we'll do in just a second to see what difference this makes to our brights. But the main thing really that's going to change is the tone mapping. So all of the different settings, all of the different monitors that you can get, they have different implementations of what HDR should look like essentially. So the signal that's being sent to your PC in theory is going to be the same if you haven't done any of this calibration, and then it's about how it's actually displayed on screen. So usually what happens is monitors that can get brighter, it means that they get a little bit less accurate with that tone mapping, whereas something like this True Black that we have here might be a little bit more accurate at the low end, but then maybe doesn't get quite so bright. But again, this is a very, very nice looking image, but I want to boost the lights. Let's go back into our calibration tool then and see what difference we have. Again, as you'd expect, True Black on the OLED. And then when it comes to the lights, is that any different? No, true black still seems to be 500 nits. Let's boost our settings in the Cyberpunk menu as well. Then let's go back into the game and see what a difference we now have. And I would say that is definitely a lot more poppy. You do have some extra brightness going on. I mean, when you look down there, it's not blinding me still, and we're probably losing a little bit of detail on the settings that I've got. So let's try one more time and see what happens if we put this in HDR Peak 1000. Right, okay, so this is now in HDR Peak 1000. To be honest with you, to the naked eye, that still doesn't look like crazy different, but I would definitely say that I can potentially see a little bit more detail in the bright areas. I mean, especially here, where we've got this karaoke sign, that looks really quite nice. It's definitely like popping out. And I think the thing with OLED displays as well is that whilst on like a mini LED display, like the bright, when it's like a really big bright area, would probably look a little bit better. I think what's a lot more normal is that you get that mix of brights and darks. And because it's OLED, you're not gonna get that horrible like blooming effect where you've got these little backlights that kind of do a full zone, but then that zone goes over into the dark section and you get, like, as I say, bits of light, some haloing around it, whereas you're not getting that here. And I would say that this is a really plush image. I mean, especially here, this parking sign, that looks fantastic. We do have some ray tracing enabled at the moment as well, and that's definitely helping to make a little bit more pop to the whole image really with the way that the lighting is displayed in this game. But yes, if you do want to test some HDR, especially on an OLED monitor, then a scene like this is a great way to do it. I would definitely say there's room for improvement in like the next generation. I think even having like future firmware updates and things on these monitors is going to get better results to the tone mapping. But as I said in both the Asus and the LG videos, while this looks fantastic, it's not like flagship TV area yet where you've got the same sort of OLED contrast, but they do get that little bit brighter. Now, obviously, because this monitor refreshes at 240 Hz, I do want to do some quick tests with maybe some Fortnite, some Apex, some multiplayer gaming, but I want this to be a bit of a comparison as well. So here we have the ROG. This is the Asus. So flat, curved, essentially same panel. This one has a fan on it, this one doesn't, otherwise not like masses of differences, right? But in terms of reflectivity, I do just want to quickly show you the differences. And one thing that I've already noticed is that the reflection that you do get in this is very true to life. There's a ring light lug, it displays as a perfect ring, and it does stay on screen for quite a while actually. It's got quite a wide window that it picks it up. But something I've noticed is that if you go for this curved display, it has to be at exactly the right angle before it picks it up, and then obviously you've got a bit more of this distorted reflection. So in a way, I actually think this could potentially be better, but it depends again where you're going to put it, because the last thing you want is this to pick up like a whole window of light and like boost it towards your face, but it's more picking up the reflections to the side of the display rather than what's actually right in front of it. So it's going to be quite interesting. But as you can tell, I did actually bring my light with me, so we can do the patented PC Centric shine a very bright light at the displays, and then you can see what you make of that. So in this instance, I'd actually now say that the flat one looks a little bit better because this is actually almost amplifying it, but as we get further away, it gets more and more distorted. So I don't know, as I say, it's going to depend on the room, I think, rather than the curvature. I mean, actually, what about lights above it as well? Does that really appear different? No, a lot of people are worried about sort of like the blacks being boosted from lights above and behind the panel, but it seems to be fairly consistent across both displays. And actually, we may as well show you the adjustments while we're here as well. There's not actually that much height adjust on the Asus, but it is a very nice sturdy stand. But again, the problem I have with the Asus is that it does that, i.e. you can't push it back very far before the whole thing falls off. Whereas with the Alienware, you can actually hang it off quite a lot before it's going to fall down. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend having your monitor like this, but I think that's actually a better design because it means you can have it further back. That is the limit with the Asus. Whereas this, yeah, you can definitely put it a lot further back. So if you've got a shallower desk, then this one might be a better bet. But that is our reflectivity test. How about we actually get this on my desk, set up and ready to go? But now that everything is plugged in, I think it's time for the most exciting bit, which is always our multiplayer section. And we are going to be running some Apex Legends here. But I do also want to say that in terms of like the form factor of this, I'm still a little bit on the fence as to what's better, ultra-wide or 16:9. I think for most people that are pure gamers, I think going for 16:9 is probably the best because you can use it for like content consumption as well, like Netflix and stuff without black bars. But then there are still some games that will either work best in 16:9 or literally they, especially competitive stuff, it literally won't let you play in ultra wide. It will give you black bars. The reason that I say I'm on the fence about it though is because if you are playing a game on an ultra wide, I think it is more immersive, and if you are going to be using the monitor for productivity, then I think it's much nicer if you've got one display to have that extra room either side, and it just makes video editing easier, or as I say, essentially simulating two screens on one. I think it works a lot nicer on an ultra wide. And if you are going to be using this for productivity, or you just want it to look its absolute, I say absolute best, if you want it to look the most accurate, then obviously I would recommend that you get something like a spider and actually calibrate it, because then you're essentially getting red is red, right? Rather than it doing the monitor's interpretation. But I would say that out of the box, it's really, really good, and it has such a wide color gamut as well, or range of colors that this can actually display, that it is going to be really useful for productivity. But you are also going to have to bear in mind that there is obviously a risk of burn-in, and I don't think it's a big deal for gamers, especially if you hide the Windows taskbar. But if you are using any applications where you've got your UI on screen at all times, then this is where I'd be a little bit more, I don't know, cautious, I suppose, about going for a monitor like this. But then again, the image quality that you're going to get for this, especially for the money, I think is really quite reasonable. And so I would certainly think about it, unless you're specifically productivity all the time and you are going to have those elements on screen. But now that we've got Apex Legends up, I mean, this is currently running on an RTX 3080, because I wanted this to be a little bit more real world rather than just use a 4090 all of the time. And we're getting between about 110 to 150 FPS. And this is running at full 4K high settings, so you could turn the settings down a little bit, or I'd probably advise using NVIDIA's NIS on this to essentially render it at 1440p, but then it will output at 4K. It looks really good. And I think regardless of what game it is that you are playing, I would highly recommend that you do use some image scaling. Because the difference in image quality isn't actually crazy difference, but the difference in frame rate definitely is going to be. And yes, I am so good at Apex Legends clearly that I managed to do that whilst talking, which is actually pretty unusual for me. Usually I die very quickly, just like that. And I've got to admit that I am really struggling to see why you would spend the extra £200-300 on the ROG over this. I mean, the feature set is very similar between the two. I mean, I do like the fact that the Asus does have that auto brightness leveling, and obviously you do have the fan inside this. I mean, this is actually quite a good test. Let's turn this down and see if you can hear it. I'll tell you what, the only thing I can hear is the PC over there. I cannot hear the fan in this at all. I mean, it will depend how long you're playing for, and obviously if you're playing HDR with like really high brightnesses, this is when the monitor is definitely going to get hot and is going to like crank up those fans. But in the initial tests, there's nothing really to speak of. But obviously as the monitor ages as well, starts to fill with a little bit of dust, I imagine it will get a bit louder. That is what happened with my Alienware downstairs, but as I say, from what I've been reading, that has 2 fans, whereas this has 1, which would probably explain why it is a little bit quieter as well. But as far as fan noise goes, it certainly doesn't seem like an issue initially. I would prefer that it did have like that auto brightness leveling feature and didn't have any fans at all that you'll find on the Asus. I will also say though that I haven't addressed really the LG elephant in the room, which is that obviously it is QD OLED versus WOLED. If you want to go for one of the Asus monitors that's going to come out in the not too distant future with the WOLED version, or you'd much rather go for the matte panel with the LG, you know, how do they compare? Well, my opinion hasn't really changed, and you can find the full video in the top right hand corner of the screen where we actually talk about the LG. We do a full review of that. That's the most recent like video in this series, if you like, and my thoughts are exactly the same with that. I think that the glossiness of this panel definitely gives it a lot more pop and just suits this monitor a whole lot more. So yes, if you're sitting in front of a window or you really want that 1080p 480 Hz mode, then obviously yes, look out for the LG. But assuming the price of the monitor is very similar, which at the moment they are, then this is still going to be cheaper, and I think it is the better monitor anyway, at least from what we've tested so far. But watch this space and we'll cover it all in the full review. So smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed for the full review, and really important, anything you want to know about this monitor, let me know down in the comment section below, and then I will put it in the full review, because I'm really excited to actually start testing this. We've got Fortnite lined up with the boys later. We'll be using this, so it's going to be a great time. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you do want to check out current pricing on anything in my setup, or of course this monitor itself and its competition, I'll leave everything linked down below with my affiliate links.
And while you're down there, why not check out Lenovo's epic gaming monitors? These displays look the business, inside and out, with cutting-edge performance for amazing gaming smoothness and visuals. There really is such a huge range of monitors to choose from. with different panels, refresh rates and form factors, so you are bound to find your favourite. Push your gaming to the next level with the Lenovo Legion. Learn more with the link down below.
But thank you guys so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.